Hey guys, this is another recent reads video where I review all the books that I have recently read. Self-explanatory, right? I have finished Starry by Jenn Bennett. This is YA contemporary romance, and this is about a girl and boy who used to be best friends. They are total enemies now. They hate each other. They won't have anything to do with each other, and they end up going on the same camping trip, and the main character, the female character Zori, did not know that her ex-friend Lennon was going to be on the trip. They're there with a group of friends from school, and all of the other friends ditched them. So they are stranded in the mountains, in the wilderness together, and Zori is a girl who did not want to go camping. She's very indoorsy. She hates going outside. And then Lennon is the guy, and in the year or so since they've talked, he apparently has become really outdoorsy, and he's kind of a survivalist, so he knows his way around the woods, and they face things like bears and snakes and thunderstorms and illness and injury and all that kind of stuff, and they have to rely on each other even though they hate each other. Like, they are the only two people left out here, and they have to find their way back to civilization. I love survival stories, and this really checked all those boxes for me. The way that these characters had to rely on each other, the way that they were facing the elements and everything. I also really enjoyed the romantic tension, because not only was this an enemies to love trope, it was also kind of a friends to love, because it was friends to enemies then to love. That made it a little more complex. It had more depth to it. Like, you could feel that these characters had a good background and that their emotions were all over the place. Their personalities are kind of opposites, so that was also kind of a cutesy factor going into it. So this is a pretty fluffy story, but it was like a comforting type of fluffy, and I've never read anything by Jenn Bennett before. I've wanted to read some of her other stuff, but I haven't been able to get those yet, and this definitely made me want to read more by her. I think that she writes romance in a way that I enjoy. Now, I hated the friends, the ones that ditched them. Like, as a mom, I wanted to call up these characters' parents and just give them an earful. Like, you don't strand somebody in the woods, but that's kind of the setup of the story. You're not supposed to like those characters, so you know, that's not a big deal. It really got to me. Like, it did what it was supposed to do in making me hate this situation. So that's actually a good thing when the writing can portray that and make you get all up in your own emotions. I really want to talk about one scene, and I think it might be considered spoilery, but I'll make that the last thing I say about this book. So if you don't want to hear this, if you don't like knowing how romance ends up when it's in a romantic book, like do they or don't they actually get together, then maybe mute or skip. I have timestamps in the description if you want to skip to the next book that I'm going to talk about, or when I put this down, you will know that you can, you know, unmute the video. The thing I want to say, mute or skip now, this is your last chance. These two characters end up having sex, and there's this scene before it happens where they're talking about it in the heat of the moment, and at first it kind of had my hackles up. Like, the male character seemed like he was trying to convince or coerce the girl into saying yes, because he was like, come on, this is why this would be a good idea or whatever. And I was like, that's not cool. Like, you shouldn't convince somebody. If someone only says yes because you are convincing them or pushing them, if you have to convince, that's not consent. But as the scene went on, I realized that she made her own choice, and that I liked seeing characters discuss their intentions and discuss what they wanted, because so often in YA especially, I feel like characters don't have a discussion. They don't talk about it. There's not a lot of forethought. It's just like, we're kissing in the moment it happens. So I actually really appreciate it. I went from being cautious to highly appreciating the fact that this book showed a conversation, and it didn't feel like she was actually being manipulated into it or anything. She made her own choices, but she addressed her concerns beforehand, and he addressed his desires beforehand. And so to me, that felt more healthy and more, it built the tension more, because you could just feel that these characters were thinking about it seriously, and that, you know, it was building up to it. It had more build up than just a lot of other books where they just hop right into it. You know, I don't know if I'm conveying myself right, but I appreciated that there was a conversation about it. So I really liked this book, and I would recommend it if you like comforting, fluffy romance or survival stories, because that was kind of an unexpected part of this. You don't normally find romantic survival stories, but I really did enjoy this book. I finished An Anonymous Girl by Greer, Hendricks, and Sarah Pekkanen. This is an adult psychological thriller. There is a psychology professor who is running a morality and ethics study, and we follow that point of view, as well as a woman who is a subject in the study. She signs up to participate and answer like a questionnaire, and as she starts answering the questions, it's like really getting into like really deep, complicated, messy, personal territory. So what I liked about this book is that it was very intense at first. Like, it grabbed me in right away. I was so curious and so interested to know what was going on, what was the purpose of this study. You just know something sinister feels like it's happening, and you don't know what, and you really want to know, or I really wanted to know. I also really loved that the professor's point of view is like in second person almost. It's a lot like the book You by Carolyn Kapnis. The character is being watched, and it makes you feel like you're being watched. The things that I did not like about this is, I guess I was about halfway or 2/3 of the way into the book, and I just started getting bored. I felt like it was dragging because it felt like the same things were being asked of the character, and she started to have like her suspicions up, and she knew what was going on and how to proceed, and then she just didn't. She just kept going in circles, and so I felt like maybe the story got a little bit aimless towards the middle, and it felt like it was dragging. And then the ending, I did not like the ending. The ending of the book took a full star off of my rating. Like, this would have been such a good book if it had had any number of other endings. Like, I can think of so many other endings that would have been so much more satisfying to me. I felt like the authors had written themselves into a knot, didn't know how to untangle it, so they just cut it down the middle, like the Gordian knot or whatever. They just decided to cut things off abruptly in a way that did not seem genuine to a character that was involved. And it wasn't fulfilling. It didn't do justice to the action that happened. It just, I didn't like it. I just don't think this was a fitting end. Anyway, I don't know what else I can say about this book. I really loved the beginning of it, and I think if you like psychological thrillers, there's a good chance you would like it, but the ending didn't work for me personally. I finished The Proposal by Jasmine Guillory. This is an adult romance about a woman who, she's been seeing this guy casually, very casually for a few months, and it's his birthday and he wants to go to a baseball game. So she goes with him and his friends, and then over the like Jumbotron screen, he asks her to marry him. And this is out of nowhere because like they've never even said I love you, they've never talked about marriage, and so she rejects him, and it's very public. So then there's another character, Carlos, who is a character from this author's previous book. He was a side character, and Carlos is the main male character in this book, and he sees this happening and he's only a few rows away. So he and his sister go down to get this woman and pretend like, oh hey, we know you, were friends from school or whatever, and they like basically rescue her because she's getting booed and everything. So this book talks a lot about the conception of like the angry woman of color, the angry black woman, and Carlos is a man who, he's actually very considerate and very aware of how men are perceived by women in the way that they may seem threatening or they may seem too aggressive or domineering, even when maybe they don't intend it, but he understands why it can come across that way. So I really enjoyed him as a character because he was very considerate, he was very self-aware, he made a lot of feminist comments. That was cool, and in that respect I liked him better than the guy from Jasmine Guillory's first book. Her first book was The Wedding Date, and The Proposal is a companion because it follows a side character from the first book. You do not have to read these books in order, but The Proposal will spoil the ending of The Wedding Date because those characters from her first book do show up in this one. So if you want to read The Wedding Date, read it first. In this book, I really enjoyed the characters. I liked their romantic build-up and situation. I loved the discussions that were brought up on race and feminism and relationships and just the way that we perceive things from other people. So I really, really liked it. I have also finished Let's Talk About Love by Kann. This is new adult because the characters are in college, and this is following Alice, who is asexual, but she is not aromantic. She is alloromantic. She wants romance, but she is not interested in sex at all. And at the start of this book, her girlfriend has just broken up with her because she wants to have sex, but Alice doesn't. And Alice is holding herself back from dating at this point because she's afraid that, you know, she's had it happen in her past where people break up with her because she doesn't want to have sex. And so she doesn't want to get into that situation again. She meets a guy and she is instantly attracted to him, like aesthetically, like he looks handsome to her. I love Alice as a character. I love Takumi as a character. I love that it was set in college and that they work in a library. I mean, I love anything set around books, right? I loved that she goes to therapy and that this book normalizes therapy. I loved the discussions about friendship and attraction and romance and asexuality, but the friendship just, it got under my skin. I did not enjoy it because there is this fight between them, and I was so firmly on Alice's side because I have experienced friend fights about kind of the same thing that they were fighting about. I've experienced that in my life, so like I just did not like the other character, and like I felt like they were selfish and just absolutely running all over Alice and not caring, like not allowing Alice to have her feelings. Things didn't actually resolve. They get into a big fight and then her friend ends up saying something like, you know, you're my family, right? I would die for you. I love you. And that's the end of it. It's like sweet words don't just sugarcoat the way that you're treating a person over and over to the point where it's become this giant wound and hurt and conflict. You can't just brush it away with sweet words. And to me, I didn't see it as a healthy friendship. But look, I can't judge anybody else's friends. I can't judge their relationships. I have no idea where these characters go from here. Like maybe in the future they actually work things out and things change. Like that's cool. But in this book, I didn't enjoy reading those scenes because I've had friend falling outs, friend fights before, and I just viscerally reacted to it. I did not like it. And this came up so often and so intensely that I just couldn't enjoy the book. Like it took a lot of enjoyment away from me. I've also finished Forever Interrupted by Jenkins Reid. This is an adult contemporary book. The book opens up with we have a character and her husband. They are newlyweds. They've been married for like a week. And like in the first chapter, he is killed in a car accident. So the rest of the book is all about grieving. This story takes place over 1 year and it is told in flashbacks. So the book starts in our present timeline where he has been killed and the main character Elsie is grieving and she is dealing with meeting his mother because their relationship happened so quickly that she actually never met his mother and he never even told his mother that he was seeing someone. Like it was a whole complicated relationship with his mom. So the mom did not know he was married, and there's all of this question about the legitimacy of their marriage and like does she actually have a right to his stuff and his belongings. And the story flashes back to when they first met. So you do see how they met, how they fell in love. And I think that because of that format, you really got so invested in this relationship. Like you saw the entire lifespan of it. This book was incredibly difficult for me to read, especially at the beginning, because like that's a huge fear of losing my spouse. I do not know what I would do. And so like I listened to this on audio and I got like 20 minutes in and I couldn't do it. I was so torn up. My anxiety was so spiked. I was sobbing and I put the book down. I was like, I want to read everything by Jenkins Reid, but I don't know if I can read this book. Like I didn't know what this actually was about before I picked it up. I was just trying to read all of Jenkins Reid's backlist. That's like one of my limits. I don't enjoy reading about the death of spouses or of children or missing children or anything happening to children, which this book also kind of covers that because you get to know the characters mother-in-law, and she is grieving her son, who he's only like in his 20s, so he's still very young. So not only am I sitting here reading from the point of view of someone who's lost her husband, but you're really getting to know someone who's lost her son. And I am just like, I was just like in panic mode for the first bit of this book. And I put it down for a few days. I thought it was just gonna have to stay unread, but over those couple of days I just kept thinking about it, and like the part that I had read, I kind of wanted to know what came of this character and how she was grieving, so I picked it back up. And I'm glad I did pick it back up, because that intense, anxious moment was really only like the first couple of chapters, and then it was over with, and you get more into the grieving process and more into finding out how they met and fell in love, and more into the main character connecting with her mother-in-law, and that stuff was so much more enjoyable to me. But this book was an extremely emotional ride, and although it was very uncomfortable and anxiety inducing for me, it was a very beautiful, well-written story, and so I did really like it. And I don't know how much of my 5-star rating is because of how it was able to pull on my emotions, but I don't think that it did that in a superficial way. I don't think that the story was about something else and then all of a sudden introduces some kind of tragedy just to pull at your heartstrings and, you know, manipulate an emotional reaction from you. But this was the entire story. Like, this is a book about grief, so it felt fitting. It was supposed to be like that. It was hard to read, but I still thought it was beautiful. That's all I'm gonna have time to review today. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you have read any of these books, let me know your thoughts on them down below, and just let me know what you have been reading recently. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in the comments.